What's going on with the ultra-liberal leftist Prime Minister Justin Trudeau goes way beyond anything that the Mueller investigation, which is really just a pathetic false flag to cover up the high crimes and misdemeanors committed by top FBI and Justice Department and CIA officials. It's just there to stonewall the process and get them beyond the statutes of limitations so they won't be prosecuted. That's the only reason why you have a Mueller investigation in the first place. What's going on with Trudeau is so much bigger than that, so much bigger than all this Russian collusion nonsense. So let me walk you through this, what's precisely going on here, because it's just going to blow your mind. And I'm very, very grateful to Ezra Levant for his extremely helpful summary of this. Back on February 27, Trudeau's former Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, testified before Canadian Parliament in a very careful and delineated detail how Trudeau and his staff deliberately tried to get her to drop criminal charges against what appeared to be a company absolutely mired in corruption and fraud. As I understand it, the company made nearly $50 million in illegal payments to Libyan government officials between the years 2001 and 2011. The company is SNC Lavalin. It's a Montreal-based engineering giant that's, if found guilty, would not be able to bid on government contracts for the next decade, which of course would have debilitating effects on Montreal's economy. The company lobbied government officials to get the Justice Department to settle the case out of court and avoid a possible criminal conviction. The Justice Department, however, determined that a settlement was out of the question, and so they began preparing their case to take the company to court. This is when allegedly both Trudeau and members of his cabinet pressured Wilson-Raybould, the Attorney General, to settle the case and basically leave the company untouched so it could continue to do business. Now, initially, Wilson-Raybould, as Attorney General, refused the request for this kind of very special treatment. And so Trudeau, his chief of staff, his finance minister, they kept coming back to her and really pressuring her to drop all the charges against the company. Apparently, they met with her on 10 separate occasions. To Wilson-Raybould's credit, she held her ground. She wouldn't budge. She said she had every intention of prosecuting this company. And so Trudeau fired her as Attorney General, and he reappointed her to the minor post of Veterans Minister. Now, after she was fired and reappointed, Wilson-Raybould had a gag order slapped on her, okay? She wasn't allowed to comment on the transition or the firing, stating that she was bound by attorney-client privilege and cabinet confidences. Again, this according to Ezra Levant's wonderful summary of the whole ordeal. So she gets fired, and she basically has this gag order slapped on her. But the story eventually began to leak out via aides or whoever, and Trudeau was the only one running around responding to the leaks, again, because this former Attorney General just couldn't speak. And so Trudeau actually turned around and claimed that Wilson-Raybould actually supported him. She was 100% behind his decision, and everything was hunky-dory. And after all, she's still part of his administration, isn't she? Veterans Minister, and right, nothing to see here. Only when Wilson-Raybould heard Trudeau say these things, she quit. She immediately resigned as Veterans Minister. And then Trudeau's right-hand man, Gerald Butts, suddenly resigned, claiming, oh, well, we didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing to see, right? That's why I'm resigning. Trudeau's right-hand man resigns, and Wilson-Raybould, the former Attorney General who Trudeau fired, turns around and hires a former Supreme Court justice as her lawyer to advise her on what she could actually say. And that's when Parliament invited her to come in and speak, to testify, and Trudeau had no choice but to waive the gag order. And boy, did she ever speak. She detailed exactly who pressured her, how, when, and among the names of those who deliberately and explicitly sought to get her to drop the charges against the company was none other than one Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And under Canadian law, any attempt to pressure the Attorney General to obstruct a criminal prosecution is an act of obstruction of justice that carries a 10-year prison term. That is precisely what Justin Trudeau is facing as we speak. So when all is said and done, Trudeau is accused of pressuring his Attorney General to cut a deal with a company facing criminal charges and then retaliating against her when she refused to do so. That's the bottom line as I understand it. Now, in case you don't know, Canada's national election is just 7 months away. Okay? Needless to say, this is the last thing in the universe that Justin Trudeau and his liberals, his left-wing supporters want to be dealing with. His poll numbers have been completely catering. They've dropped over 10 points. They're down to 35% approval, his lowest level of approval since 2015. Over 60% of Canadians have either a negative or very negative view of him. The latest Ipsos poll found that it was just released the last day or so. 75% of Canadians believe that there was, in fact, inappropriate behavior on the part of Trudeau and his cabinet, and 50% of Canadians believe he should resign immediately. And as more details come out, you can only assume that that number is just going to increase. Already Conservatives are calling for his resignation, his immediate resignation, given the plausibility of the charges. And indeed, a second cabinet member of his just resigned in the last day or so. Needless to say, this is a political disaster. And if the last elections in Ontario and Quebec are any indicator, Canadians appear more than ever ready to turn to the conservative right in the upcoming national elections, thus effectively ending the age of Trudeau and one of the most significant pro-globalist, pro-liberal administrations on the planet. So, of course, we'll be keeping an eye on how things develop here, but there is no question it does appear that Canada is going to be experiencing a massive political earthquake in the months ahead, and we can only hope that it's one that shifts the nation ever increasingly to the political right. As